So hello everyone and welcome to this month's edition of the Real Places webcast. And we're going to be talking a bit about Rochester, New York. So we've got two wonderful CNU members who are joining us from Rochester to talk about the community and some interesting approaches to engaging young people in the movement, but also really a deeper dive into what's happening in Rochester. So I'd like to welcome Nana and Maria. So Maria, if you could just do an introduction and we'll get started.
Sure. I am Maria Furgiuele, the Executive Director of the Community Design Center in Rochester. The Design Center has been in existence for 15 years now, and we work to help educate, do community engagement and advocacy for the creation of public spaces as a means to bring people together.
Thank you. Nana?
Sure. My name is Nana-Yaw Andoh, and I am a professor of architecture and urbanism at Rochester Institute of Technology. And I primarily teach a couple of courses, so an adaptive reuse design studio and an urban and regional planning lecture course.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. And I think we can go ahead and get started on our questions for today. Let me pull those up. So Nana, as I was looking at guests for this month's webcast, I was looking at professors in the new urbanism who have a lot of experience with urbanism in particular, and I noticed that you had a really interesting teaching philosophy, and I'd like to talk about that a little bit before we get into the meat of discussing the community transformation in Rochester in the inner loop. And I wanted to ask you about your teaching and preparing the next generation of urbanist architects. And I note that you put an emphasis on constant exploration and on drawing. So what's the relationship, especially of drawing, to your practice of urbanism, and why does that matter so much to urbanism in particular?
Sure. So let's start with exploration. And exploration to me is primarily about understanding the context. So when I run my urban design studio, it's slightly unique in a sense that I never give students a program. I need them to actually take a look at the context, investigate, take a look at the demographics surrounding context, what inspires the community, and then try to come up with a design solution that embodies the needs of that community. And in that sense, drawing is absolutely critical. Okay, so to explore without drawing, you really miss a lot. So what I want the students to do is to arrive on site, to document as much as possible through drawing, observe through drawing, document through drawing, and really by doing so, you just get to that granular level of being able to understand what the community is all about. And then when they design solutions for any problems they encounter, they really have kind of a catalog of drawings to try to refer to on what the community needs, and in a sense, really come up with a solution that fits that community.
Thank you. So you do a lot of work. So in your urban design studio, you kind of take a 360 approach to. Seems like you take a holistic approach to designing, building better places. It's not just one angle. There's a lot of different angles. What are some of the other aspects of your teaching philosophy that have really been able to help you engage students and create, better curriculum?
I would say that the easiest thing I can say is looking at everything through the lens of a half-mile radius from the project site. So what is around, what can people walk to, what are people lacking, and really get a sense for the needs of the community and or an amenity that could be enhanced. And then by taking that approach, you really can never really zoom in directly to the site to design a building, which seems to be the instinct for most design students, right? Is to zoom in on a site and just design a beautiful landmark, iconic ode to architecture without really taking a look at the context. So the context to me is everything, and we start with a half-mile approach, 360 approach, if you will, and zoom out as much as possible to really get a good idea for what the context we're designing in and what the impacts of the building will have on the community as a whole.
Great. Yeah, that's very much another pillar kind of concept of the new urbanism about looking at design through the entire transect. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to shift gears. Thanks so much for that. I'd love to shift gears and talk a little bit about Rochester. So Maria, you grew up in Rochester, and you work in Rochester in community design. What's special about Rochester for you?
Well, it's interesting because I'm not from Rochester originally. I was born in Venezuela, and we have a kind of interesting family history that brought us here to Rochester. But my father left Italy as a young man and made his life in Venezuela, where he met my mom and married and started a family. And then he brought us to Rochester to be reunited with his parents and his siblings that were moving from Italy at the same time. And so Rochester is home. We grew up with 5 families, my uncles and aunts and their kids. They're a big clan. That was my first experience of community. And as much as I tried very hard, as all young people do, to fly away from the home nest, my best job offer was here in Rochester. And I came to understand that I really wanted to be here. It's the place where I have a history, where we have memories, where we have a network of friends and family and colleagues. And I think what's really special about Rochester is it's small enough where anyone who wants to come into a community and be an agent of change has the opportunity to do that. And there are a lot of opportunities here in Rochester.
That's really interesting to talk about your experience and your journey from Venezuela over into Rochester. And I think that's a great segue to talk about some of Professor Andoh's work. And I'm just wondering for you, Nana, what lessons have you from community design in developing nations have you found to be applicable in Rochester, if any? I mean, so often the global northern urban design community, we tend to think of applying lessons from our cities in the reverse direction. But surely there are just as many lessons to be learned from what isn't working in rapidly urbanizing global South and the challenges in those communities. How can those things tie together, and how can we here better inform our work based on things that we find in those countries?
Yeah.
Well,
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Nana.
Sure. I was going to say that, as you can tell from my accent, I'm not originally from Rochester either. I was born in Ghana, and that's been a big part of my development, is what we can do with developing countries and communities in an effort to really give them a good urban development and urban context. And the one thing that I found is, regardless of the community you are working in, we all kind of want the same things. We want a better quality of life in our built environment. So a lot of the communities that I have worked in abroad, especially, you are looking at, there's really an inventive and creative way to have an immediate solution to a problem. What I mean by that is, most of the issues that people in developing countries are facing are immediate, and they cannot wait for an election cycle or for politicians to get their acts together to get projects done. So most of the things that we do get implemented the very next day. The problem is, those are intended to be temporary solutions, and they end up being more permanent than they need to. So there really isn't a bigger master plan per se. It just becomes a piecemeal solution. So I think maybe one thing we can learn from developing countries is the immediacy of project development and the impact an immediate project can have. And I think we're kind of trying to see that now in tactical urbanism, right? But we don't want and need that to be a permanent solution. It has to be part of the process and an example for what the permanent solution can be. So that immediacy is very important. That sense of urgency is very important. But at the same time, once government agencies see that, I guess, trying to put those solutions into action, that is when they need to step in to help the communities to make those much more of a permanent, viable solution.
Maria, did you have a follow-up thought too?
No, I completely agree with Nana. Sometimes we rely so much on getting the plan done in this kind of long-range planning that we forget that there are some interim steps that should be taken and can be taken to inform that plan or decision making. So that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, that's been something that CNU, I think, has learned very well, that it's really important to have a short-term approach and a long-term approach, and to include things like tactical urbanism, so people in the community can see the actual effects of the designs, the plans, and the solutions that we're proposing, and that they can see, frankly, that we listen to them, and that we're implementing the things that we find in communities that they need. So I really like that we discussed that. So the next question is for Maria, and this is another segue that tied in beautifully. At CNU, through our legacy projects, we see a lot of fascinating approaches to fostering better community engagement during charrettes and planning meetings. We see everything from people printing out huge maps and allowing people to put dots on maps that explain where the areas are where they think that we can do better urbanism, or to have people record their thoughts on audio recorders. There's a lot of different really interesting approaches. And I'm curious, what are some of the ways your community design center has been able to foster more effective community involvement and civic engagement to create more equitable, diverse, vibrant, and healthy communities in Rochester?
Well, here at the Design Center, we've focused on three main avenues. One is education, which is through our lecture series. We bring expertise into the community to help everyone in the community learn about placemaking strategies and the impact that they can have. When we bring a speaker in, we really take them through the ringer. They have a whole series of events and meetings throughout the day. We want to have access to our decision makers, our civic leaders. We want to have access to a community organization. So they generally come in and they do several presentations and meet with a variety of groups. But it's a very in-depth kind of engagement in allowing the speaker to share their expertise with particular community groups. And now we've started a follow-up, which we call community conversation, which is after the speaker presents, we have 2 weeks later, invite the community back in to follow up the conversation of what these strategies were that were discussed. So that's another level of engagement. But we also want to do advocacy. We do that through our awards program. And then our hands-on community engagement work is through our charrette process, which is interesting in that we have professional facilitators that join small teams of community members, and they actually work to be the tools of the community to help them understand strategies, to give them the understanding of vocabulary, and just document what their ideas are. So we do the same thing. We create big sheets of paper. We give them focused areas, but they work with experts that are design experts to help them be the translator from their ideas in their heads to what the design language is. And that's been a really great project. Now we'd like to follow that up with, again, having some programs for implementation of short-term, middle-term, and long-term projects. So that would be the next level we hope to get more involved with.
Got it. Well, yeah, your speaker series is something I'm starting to get really interested in from what little I've learned about it, and I can't wait to keep following it. And I should mention that Lynn Richards, our CEO and president, will be on a speaker series on May 22nd. So we really look forward to that, and thank you for having Lynn. This kind of ties into my final question, and this is a question for both of you. And I'm just kind of curious to get your perspective from, the Rochester community on the Inner Loop project. It was one of the first cities, if not the first city, Rochester, to fill in a below grade highway and to think about replacing it with a surface street, which it did. And at the time, that was really revolutionary. So where are things with the Inner Loop today? How do you feel about how things are going with the Inner Loop and the larger community in general? So that's kind of my big picture Rochester question for right now.
You want to tackle that first, Nana, or do you want me to?
Please, go ahead.
So the Inner Loop is obviously a large circle that kind of strangles the downtown, the center of our city. So it was easier to remove the southeast portion because it had the least amount of traffic. And so, they were smart to do that. And they've learned a lot of lessons in doing that. Some is that they've divided the land all up for development parcels, and there has been some information from the community wanting to see some green space incorporated. So this was a small portion of the Inner Loop. It's about 6 to 8 acres that were recaptured. They're beginning to look at removing the northeast portion, which is the more trafficked area, and the area that really divides a community from a rather affluent urban center community to a very challenged neighborhood on the other side of the loop. So filling in the Inner Loop is doing a lot of great things to re-knit the fabric of the city together. And it's the exact opposite strategy that happened when the Inner Loop was created, which was in fact under the guise of urban renewal to really separate people. So it's exciting to see. It requires a lot of planning, and you have to be very intentional about what the ultimate goal is. If you're looking to reknit the fabric of the city, you're bringing different diverse groups together. There's going to be some need to be careful and thoughtful about how that is accomplished so that we can be successful in actually achieving our goal.
Yeah. And if I could add to that, I would say that the introduction of the inner loop, Maria is absolutely correct, actually fragmented the community in a really, really big way. And I think looking back and trying to fix those mistakes, we need to put some policies in place to ensure that as we start to stitch it together, it doesn't create gentrification and displace people. So either they put some policies in place so that all new development has some affordable housing units incorporated into it, or some financing mechanisms to help lower income people be able to achieve some financial security and or home ownership, bring in some small businesses as well, that we really need to take a holistic approach to really bringing together Rochester as a really beautiful, diverse community, and not a homogenous, wealthy, upper class community, if you will. So we really need to take a very, very good look at some policies that will enable that to happen.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for joining this webcast today and for sharing your thoughts. Does anyone have any last salvos or thoughts on Rochester or urbanism to share?
Well, we'd love to have you come and visit. We've got a lot of exciting things going on here, and we really believe that we have an opportunity to use what are currently our challenges, the poverty rate, the segregation, and work through the tools that we have with Congress and New Urbanism and placemaking to create a community that is a model of diversity and hopefully a wonderful place for everyone to enjoy.
Yeah, and I would just say that maybe in 2 to 3 years, CNU should come to Rochester.
Sooner the better.
That would be amazing, and we will. Let's talk with our friends at CNU New York, and let's make it happen.
Sounds great.
So thanks, Maria. Thanks, Nana, and I really appreciate you joining this webcast. It's been wonderful, and I look forward to talking with both of you again soon. Thanks again for your time, and we'll see you next month.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.